And welcome back. Thanks for being with us here today on TV Aspen and welcoming our guest, Marilyn Marks. Marilyn, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Jim.
Aspen Citizens Group is the group that you're basically in charge of, 300 residents or so?
Well, there are 300 subscribers. Not all of them are full-time residents. Some are part-time residents.
Okay, and the topic today is all the hubbub over historic designation of properties. If your property gets designated historic, the complaint by the homeowners is that it will drop your property values, your net worth in essence, because you won't have much control over that home's renovation or sale.
Yes, that is part of the issue. Also, the issue particularly relates to 20th century properties, which is the subject of the current ordinance that is recently on the books. The renovations of Victorian homes, the old miners' cabins, and the incentives that the city gives for those are pretty adequate, and in fact can increase property values. But there's a lot of difference between what you can do with the typical Victorian home and the 20th century rancher. The incentives don't work very well, and as a result it makes the development extremely difficult, and it does decrease property values, sometimes as much as 50 to 75%. And many of the residents, that is their financial security, so of course they're squawking about it.
You know, the residents have come forward at the City Hall meetings, Marilyn, but they haven't been extremely vocal to the press. Have they designated you for a particular reason because your home isn't on the list? Right?
Oh no, and in fact I'm very fortunate in that my property is not at all at risk and not on the list. My interest in this comes purely out of the governance issue. When this was done in an overnight emergency without public input, and it has so much impact on so many property owners, it's just something that hit a nerve with me, and although my property is not at risk, I felt that it was time to take a stand on the governance aspects of what the City Council was doing.
So basically you feel like the government doesn't have any business dealing with people's properties
well, no,
in this regard?
I would say that the government should be what the people who live here and who vote here want it to do. And what we were so upset about was the fact that the council did not come to the community and say, okay, historic preservation, what does this community want? What do you want to preserve? What are the costs? What are the benefits? This should have been a community involved discussion. It would have taken months, certainly, to get enough consensus. But then I think the public could be very satisfied with what we ended up with as a historic preservation policy.
Well, as you know, former Aspen Mayor Bill Sterling, who's been a longtime realtor, he pretty much said the same thing recently, is that, he wished that council and city leaders had just tried a little bit more to, breach the wall and to communicate with the residents directly before bringing this on.
Yes,
And
I would
that's
say
the general feeling of the homeowners.
right. I would say they should have tried a whole lot harder than they did, because they did this in overnight session with, in fact, a lot of very bad facts. They had to present facts in order to pass an emergency ordinance. An emergency ordinance works very different than the standard ordinance, where there is a chance for public input, a chance for discussion and dialogue. An emergency ordinance requires there to be facts proving that there is an urgent need. And what happened in this case is that City Council had some data. It turns out to be completely inaccurate data, and they passed this law on inaccurate data and data that they would not turn over to the public to let the public look at. So yes, there needed to be considerably more dialogue between council and the citizens.
Now, we've got some invitations out for the city planners, Chris Bendon and Amy, to come in eventually over this. But on Monday night's meeting for the review of 48 that was postponed, what do you think is going to happen?
I don't know. I went to council meeting last night along with Mike Maple, who's also working with the Aspen Citizens Group, and we asked that question. What will happen next Monday night? Because it is on the agenda. We understand that there is some redrafting of Ordinance 48 to take place. We don't know what that might entail, nor whether that would be a first reading next Monday night or a second reading. We certainly hope that we see things like submission of personal income statements and tax returns taken out of the requirement for someone to get off of the list. And quite frankly, we don't know what type of vote there might be or what they are considering doing. We wish we did know. We do understand as well that there is to be a public input session, a clicker session, as they had for Entrance to
those
Aspen.
are popular.
Yes, I think probably Entrance to Aspen and one of the other ones they had was popular. Commercial Mix wasn't quite such a hit because there was not much public input into those questions, and the questions didn't really have the opportunity for citizens to say how they felt. So one thing we did last night was ask City Council to be sure to get public input on the questions they want to ask for in these clicker sessions, which we think are a great idea so long as they involve a broad base of community.
Now, what we want to make clear to the viewer who doesn't know that clicker session is when they got together, like at the Wheeler Opera House,
Right.
and they had instantaneous feedback
Right.
on the questions asked of the audience. So that's a big plus because you can get an immediate feeling right away.
Absolutely. We just need to make sure that those questions do reflect what the real issues are, and then when they give multiple choice answers, the multiple choice answers really reflect the complete nature of the kinds of answers that are in real life.